Some of you might know the name Nicky Cruz. Nicky Cruz was a troubled young man. He grew up in Puerto Rico. From the age of 3, he would be regularly beaten by his parents. His father would throw him naked into a room full of wild birds to punish him, sometimes if he was naughty. And the birds would get frightened, they'd scratch him all over. Poor Nicky would be terrified, a little boy. At the age of 9, he tried to commit suicide. Didn't succeed. At the age of 15, he moved with his family to New York City. And he quickly ran away from his family and joined a street gang called the Mau Maus. And he quickly became known for his violence, his aggression, and he became their leader. He was the leader of the most feared street gang in New York. One policeman said that if he saw this gang coming towards him, he'd want to open fire just for seeing them there. They were that feared and violent. Nicky said this about his time in New York. New York was a jungle, and the law of the jungle is you behave like an animal. Animals don't know the difference between right and wrong. An animal has to kill another animal for survival. And once when he was in court, a psychiatrist told Nicky, there is a dark place in your personality that no one can penetrate. You are headed for prison, the electric chair, and hell. Well, I asked you to think about what's wrong with the world. Why is it that this world produces people like Nicky Cruz? Why is it that it produces people who are capable of doing such awful things? You know, to look at the news any day of the week and you see evidence of people doing terrible things to one another. And you think, what's wrong with the world that we can do that produces that in people? And every religion in the world asks that question and seeks to give a solution. Every religion in some way is asking the question, what's wrong with the world and how can we sort it out? How can we as people and how can we as a society be transformed? And we had some of the answers that you guys were thinking of earlier. Maybe the answer is to be unselfish, to act out of other people's interests and not your own. Or I've heard people give different answers to that question. Maybe the answer is education. We need to just educate people more, and then we'll stop doing these kinds of things. But we all have this idea that there is a right way for society to work, for people to act. A way that works, that means we do good to one another, and if you go against it, actually we hurt one another and we hurt ourselves. We all have an idea of morals, of right and wrong. And in the olden days, in many societies around the world, that idea of morals came from God or from religion, having something outside of yourself that told you what was right or wrong. You say, well, why is this right and why is this wrong? Because God says so, and that settles the argument. In the last 100 years in the West, we've got rid of that idea, and it is very unfashionable to say that morals come from God or from anything outside of yourself. And what most people today want to say is that there is right and there is wrong, but it doesn't come from outside of us. We need morals that are separate from religion, that don't come from any idea of God, because religion is a bad thing. You have people like Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, writing books like God is Not Great, Why Religion Poisons Everything. I saw a quote online the other day. Morality is doing what's right regardless of what you're told. Religion is doing what you're told regardless of what's right. What most people think nowadays is to be moral, we need not a standard that's taken from God, but a standard that is from us, that's separate from religion. Now, we're just going to think about that for a couple of minutes. There are two big problems with that idea. Firstly, I'm going to call it the says who problem. Says who. So, as people, we are today moral relativists. Okay, let me try and explain that. It means we're allowed to have different claims, different ideas about what truth is and what's right and what's wrong. Say there's somebody with a different opinion to me about what's right and wrong. So maybe someone from a different faith, different culture, or maybe someone with a different lifestyle to me. If I say to them, you're wrong, you can feel that already, can't you? That feels like an arrogant thing. That feels like a hurtful thing. That feels like a harmful thing. That's not allowed. We shouldn't impose our ideas of right and wrong onto other people. That's kind of the air we breathe today. And yet, we believe in moral absolutes. We are highly moral people, and we believe that some things are just right and some things are just wrong. Murder is just wrong. Child abuse is just wrong. Tyranny is just wrong. Slavery is just wrong. We believe that if the world is going to work, there are things that are just right and just wrong, and everyone should accept them. We believe there are morals that are binding on every person from every place, from every culture, and every time. But the problem is, if there's nothing outside us, if there's no external standard, no God, nothing like that, then if you make any kind of moral claim to me, I can just say, says who? And the only answer is, says me. Silly example. Maybe not silly. Cannibalism. Some parts of the world, that sometimes that's been okay. For us, we look at that and we go, what? They're wrong. But they're looking back at us going, no, you're wrong. Says who? Says me. There are countries in the world where if you treat a woman as worth less than a man, that's acceptable, that's fine. If, on the other hand, you sleep with someone who isn't your marriage partner, that is deeply shameful. Come to our country. Sleep with someone who isn't your marriage partner, within certain confines, that's basically okay. On the other hand, treat a woman as less valuable than a man, that is horrendous, that's deeply shameful. The exact reverse, the other way around. We look at them, we say you're wrong. They look at us, they say you're wrong. We go, says who? Maybe we say, well, there's more of us over here, so that's why we do it this way. We're right. Okay, so we decide what's right and wrong by how many people there are. Okay, well, in that case, what about a majority who want to exterminate a minority? Does that make them right? Can we really decide right and wrong that way? The writer Dostoevsky said, if there's no God, everything is permitted. Now, he's not saying you can't be moral without God, okay? I want to just step away from that. I'm not saying people who don't believe in God are immoral. Not at all. And there are many people in this world who don't believe in God who I'd accept to be more moral than me. What I'm saying is, if you try and get me to follow your morals, and I say, says who, there is nothing you can do to convince me otherwise. There's no standard that you can apply to me to make me agree with you if there's nothing outside of me, if there's no God. We need moral authority. We need a standard by which we can say something's right, something's wrong. If not, if enough people get away with sexual abuse like they did 20, 30 years ago, there's no standard to say that's wrong. Or a few weeks ago, as a young man live streams himself killing his younger sister with a machine gun. And inside we go, that's horrendous, that's wrong. If there's nothing outside of us, then there's nothing wrong there. It's just like, well, I like that, I don't like that. I like vanilla ice cream, I don't like strawberry ice cream. That is all morals become if there's no standard, if there's no God, nothing outside us. Make it personal. When you've been hurt, when you've been wronged by somebody, and you felt that deeply, they should not have done that. They've broken the rules. In the world of says who, there's no rule they've broken. They've just done something you didn't like. It doesn't prove anything, but I want to ask you, are you happy living in that world? The world of says who? Second problem. This is the I can't problem. I've said we need moral authority. We need more than that. Moral authority isn't enough. There have been plenty of societies around the world that have had lots of moral authority, but they have not been able to get their people to behave in the right way. Even when we can agree on what's right, we can't do it. And the idea that religious people have been worse, or religious nations have been worse, just doesn't work. Look at history, you'll see it's actually the states who have completely got rid of the idea of God who have done the worst damage to their own people and to the world by far. Religion's not the problem, it's us. What about you as an individual? There's something in us, isn't there, that veers away from what we know to be right. And like a shopping trolley that's always broken, no matter which one you pick, it veers off towards the thing that we know to be wrong. Let's say with my children, they're doing something wrong, and I assert my moral authority and I say, "Don't you ever let me see you doing that again." They won't. They won't ever let me see them doing that again. They'll do it, they'll just be very careful that I don't see them doing it. What about you? Take a look at the people on your table. Take a look around you. This isn't rhetorical. Actually do it, please. See how they're smiling. See how they think you're a pleasant person to be around. That's because they don't know the full story, isn't it? No matter how moral you are, I'm going to take a punt that there is something about you. Maybe it's something in your past. Maybe it's only the thoughts that you have about other people, that if they knew it, they would not be smiling at you. It's true of me. I'm guessing it's true of you too. Have you ever said, "I will never do that thing again"? Have you done it again yet? The "I can't" problem. Moral authority isn't enough. We need moral transformation. We need change. Okay, the says who problem, the "I can't" problem. As ever, we're going to think briefly about, can the Christian say anything better? Does the Bible have better news for us than that? We looked at two verses in the Bible. And we're going to look at the one right at the beginning of the Bible first, from the book of Genesis. And the point is here, only God gives moral authority. So God created mankind in his own image. Go right to the beginning of the Bible and you see something outside of us, God. And that there is right and there is wrong because there is a God. You say, says who? Says the ultimate being, says the creator of the universe, says the original life from which all life began. Says the original wisdom from whom all wisdom is copied out like copying an essay. The original goodness by which we measure whether something is good or bad. There is something outside of us, a standard by which we can measure whether something is right or wrong. He doesn't just do good, he is good. He can't do anything else. He can never act out of character. He's always perfectly consistent, perfectly good, because that's who he is. And this says we were created in his image, with his stamp, with his imprint, created like him. And so we have built into who we are a sense of what is right and a sense of what is wrong, because we're made in his image. And you see in those verses, he gave us a job to do. He said, rule over the world, be his representatives, reflecting who he is, and ruling over this world, and doing it well. And so there we have a standard for what's right and what's wrong. Does it reflect God? Yes, then it's right. Does it reflect God? No, then it's wrong. Right and wrong coming to existence because there's a God and because of who he made us. Ask a Christian what's wrong with the world? Go on 2 chapters. We rejected him. We rejected his imprint, his image. We rejected the role he gave us in the world. And so we got that kind of lean that we all have away from what's right and towards what's wrong. Now, you might not believe this. That's okay. But I want to ask you, if you're not a Christian, between that and the world of says who, the world without God, which makes most sense of right and wrong? If you believe there is something called right and there's something called wrong, which world makes most sense of that? Which universe does that belong in? What about a solution? Does Christianity have a solution? Yes, it does, and that's the second verse that we're looking at. Only Jesus deals with our wrongness. Could we go on one slide, please? Thank you very much. And first half of that verse, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. It's talking about Jesus, God's Son. And just sit on this verse for a little minute, because this is astounding. Given what we just said about God, that he is goodness itself. He's the definition. He is the essence of everything that is pure and lovely and beautiful. That he cannot even look at something that is evil. He cannot bear for it to be near him. It says he became sin. For a few hours, while Jesus was killed on the cross, if you ask the question, what is wrong with the world? You could point at Jesus and say, he is. That is everything that is wrong with the world. He became sin. He became everything that was wrong, everything that was unlovely, everything that was worthy of punishment. He had done none of it. But it says he became sin. And so on the cross, Jesus' Father looked at him not with love and with care, but with indignation and with everything that our wrongness deserved. Perfectly moral God was treated as an immoral human being. Why? So that we would never have to be. And that means that only Jesus brings us moral transformation. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You see, when we hear that, when we hear Jesus died for your sins, we go one of two ways. Some of us go, great, that means I don't have to do anything. I don't have to change. I don't have to have any kind of moral transformation. I can live how I want. Others of us go, oh my goodness, Jesus died for me. Now I've got to do something. I've got to transform myself. I've got to create righteousness. And we tend to go one way or the other, to license or to legalism. I wonder which one you are. You probably have one default, or maybe you swing between the two. Either I don't need transformation, or I need to transform myself. I heard last week of a man who went from one to the other. He was living and rejecting the faith of his Christian parents as however he wanted. Like, God will forgive me, it's absolutely fine. And then one day he was drunk driving through his town, and he crashed through some barriers, and miraculously the car stopped just in front of this enormous boulder outside a church on which was written, "Prepare to meet your maker." It sounds unlikely, I'm told it's true. And he thought, my goodness, I've got to sort myself out. I know, I'll become a pastor. And he went right over to the other side and became pastor of a church because he had to earn something. He had to make himself righteous. And it wasn't until many years later, after he'd been leading a church for a long time, that someone said to him this: Jesus died to make you the righteousness of God. He didn't just create the possibility for you to be righteous. He created the reality of it. He didn't just wipe your slate clean so that you could start again. He didn't just wipe off your debt so you could start saving. When Jesus died, he secured your actual rightness with God, your actual reconciliation. He took the Father's frown and won you the Father's smile. We are justified before we're transformed. Not legalism on this hand, not license on this hand. God's grace changes on the inside. Only Jesus' death gives us power to change. Let's go back to Nicky Cruz. He met a pastor called David Wilkerson who told him God has the power to change your life. Nicky said, I started cursing out loud. I spat in his face. I hit him. I told him, I don't believe what you say. Get out of here. And he fought and he threatened. But eventually he came along somewhere where he heard about Jesus' death. And he writes this: I was choked up with pain. My eyes were fighting. Tears came down, more tears, and I was fighting, and then I surrendered. I let Jesus hug me. I laid my head on his chest, and I said, I'm sorry. Forgive me. There was nothing he could do. He was forgiven just like that. And then he said, when I opened my eyes, I got a new heart. And the very first thing he did was go down the police station and hand in his weapons. That psychiatrist said to him, there's a darkness in you that nobody can penetrate. Jesus did. Jesus penetrated that darkness and changed him, and only he can do that. Only God gives moral authority. Only Jesus brings transformation. And if you're here and you're not a Christian, there are people on your tables who, hopefully, have experienced that. And I want you to ask them about it in the questions we're going to be thinking about coming up. Ask them, how has God changed you?